This is Mimzy from MimzyVids, joining me today as my guest host. Mimzy, how's it going?
Good. I've been so excited and like pumped for this. So this is really cool. Yeah, I've never been on a call-in show, so this is exciting.
Yes. And just to remind everybody watching live, if you've never seen this show before, this is Truth Wanted. This is a show where we talk about what people believe and why. This is a call-in show where we take in people's calls live. So if you're watching the stream live right now, the number should be on screen for you to call, and we'll take in calls here in a second. But you should go ahead and get your call in now so you're into the queue. But we're going to talk the first couple of minutes here with Mimzy and kind of introduce herself and what she's been doing in the community. I mean, Mimzy has really great videos if you haven't checked them out. She is an ex-Muslim who talks mostly about kind of ex-Muslim issues and Islam and other kinds of things around that area. She specializes in videos. I mean, you do comedy, you do commentary. I mean, your videos just run the whole gambit, which is really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I've dabbled in a bit of comedy just because obviously my husband, who you had on your show like a month ago, was it? Like his main thing was comedy, so I've done a bit of that, but mainly it's kind of just talking about my journey, my personal experience through believing in a religion and all the different aspects of that, and then coming out of that, because it's quite a traumatic experience, what it was for me. So I do try and just kind of like personalize it, because it's this kind of alien thing to people. Like even like Muslims don't think that they can not believe in Islam. It's just like it's just part of your culture and your life. You don't think, oh, like I can be an atheist. It's so unusual. So I talk about that, and that's basically my channel. But I do also do like normal like vlogs and like life stuff as well. Like it's not all just about like religion, and I talk about like bits of like politics and my views on loads of things, because the other thing I want to do is, I felt like a lot of the kind of ex-Muslims out there, or the ones that I was watching, I felt like there was kind of a side missing, where it's just like you just got to know the person, and like I wanted to humanize it a bit as well, just kind of like, this is me and this is what I do on like a normal day.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think that's interesting, being a show at the Atheist Community of Austin, is we see a lot of people who are atheists, obviously, but a lot of those people come from predominantly Christian backgrounds and have most of their experiences with that kind of religion, or some denomination thereof. And some people don't have as much contact with the Muslim world, or especially the ex-Muslim world. I'm just glad that you have a channel where you can kind of express what it's like to be in that world, and like give other people a sense of like, oh, this is what you can do now that like this is where you're at in life, and you have these change in beliefs. Because I imagine that, I mean, the support system that you guys have are probably not as robust as it might be for someone as myself, who's an ex-Christian.
Definitely. It's as I said, it's kind of unusual. It's a newer thing. I mean, Islam is a newer religion anyway, in comparison to Judaism and Christianity. So it's kind of like, it's so embedded in your life. Like it's not just a belief system, it's a way of life, it's a political system, it's everything. So and it's very cultural. Like, you go to these Muslim countries and it's like the culture is the religion. There's no difference. They can't differentiate between the two anymore. So that becomes difficult. And so when you do leave it, I think that's why I say it's so traumatic, because it's kind of like you lose everything. Like suddenly your political way of looking at the world changes as well. So it's not just like, it's how you believe your government should be structured, or how, everything, like it's literally everything. So it's kind of like you're suddenly lost, and you're suddenly confused about like how you feel about like homosexuality, or like how you feel about like, do you know what I mean? Yeah. So
I can relate to that part, at least, like definitely. Yeah. And we were talking, I think Vidu and I were talking about this when he was on the show too. Like your political beliefs really change as well, which is interesting. And I never realized how much my religion kind of influenced that. But I'd love if you could just, give a brief synopsis of like kind of how you got to how you are now, like growing up as a Muslim to an ex-Muslim, what that was like, and, just give us your story.
Yeah. So, okay. So I went to like a Muslim school my whole life. So from the age of like 5, I wore like the headscarf, like the hijab. And, you know, it's a Muslim school is basically, you know, you learn about like Arabic and Islamic studies and Quran, as well as your English, math, science, and everything else. So you kind of, I grew up in this bubble of like, we didn't really meet non-Muslims because we were only around. So we went to school, and then our community, and like literally there was no non-Muslims, and we were living in England, by the way. I brought up in London. So it was, yeah. So it was only when I kind of left like high school that I was like, oh, this is the real world. And like, this is how other people are. And so growing up in my bubble, I kind of felt, I was very religious. Because that's what I knew, I guess. And it was when I kind of left, and like, especially when I went to university, I think that's when I actually was, I was part of this scene, they call it the Dawah scene, which is basically like where you spread Islam. So you kind of like speak to people about Islam, and like I actually would make like leaflets. Oh
my gosh.
Yeah. So I was like really into it. Like I would try, because at the end of the day, when you believe something like that, it's basically you guys are going to heaven and everyone else is going to hell. And that actually was something that really upset me. And eventually was one of the main reasons why I just couldn't accept it anymore and wanted to leave. But that was something that upset me while I was a Muslim, because I was like, I want everyone to go to heaven. Like, that's really sad. I don't want them to go to hell. So I would really try, and like, I would like, and now I cringe remembering like what I would say, and like, but it's because I genuinely cared about people, and like, I would always like slide it in conversations where like, oh, well, you know, in our religion, like, like, so I would always like be like, well, we can help you with that. So I would always kind of like slide it into conversations. So I was pretty like that. I was quite pushy about it. So yeah. And then going through that, actually, funnily enough, was like the beginning to me leaving and becoming an atheist, because I started having discussions and like really kind of was faced with difficult questions by people. And like looking at it from their perspective, I was like, oh, I never thought about it like that. That's interesting. And then I would be like, right, I'm going to go away and research the hell out of this, and then get back to these people and be like, remember what you told me? This is why, and this is why, and that's why you should become a Muslim. So that was kind of how I started doing it. So I would research. I mean, one of the things is like, you know, I mean, about kind of the Prophet marrying like a 6 or 9-year-old, you know, things that non-Muslims kind of would come back to me with and be like, well, why did that happen? Why do women wear hijab? Why is there inequality between men and women when it comes to, you know, their statements? So if you're in court, in Sharia Islamic court, for example, you know, if there's a testimony, a woman's testimony is half that of a man's. So those kinds of questions that, quite frankly, like I just didn't really have an answer to, and I really tried to have an answer to. Eventually they kind of started to pile up and I was like, oh, okay, I just don't have an answer to this. But it was over like years of me like really trying to adjust it. And I actually became a very like, eventually towards the end, I actually became a very spiritual like Muslim. So I was kind of like, I'm still Muslim, but I don't take things literally anymore. And I just kind of take the idea of things. And that lasted for a bit. And then eventually I was like, yeah, I can't. I'm an atheist.
Wow. You know, that's so weird, because like you've almost beat by beat described my story in very similar ways, but like, you know, it's coming from a Muslim perspective and not a Christian perspective. And it's so interesting to see kind of those cross-cultural ties. And especially you see it with other people who tell these stories as well. It's like oh yes, I was hardcore into it, and then I kind of gradually let go and was more spiritual in time. You know, like I feel like that's a common thread that happens with a lot of people's stories. So it's interesting to see that yours kind of follows that a bit as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's an assumption, I feel like, I don't know how it is so much in the Christian community, but definitely with the Muslim community, that there's an assumption that it's like laziness, or it's like, oh, you just want to drink alcohol, like, oh, you just want to party, or you just want a boyfriend, like, that's why you left. There is a big assumption of like, it's just, I can't be bothered. Like, people don't realize, like, it's like I was searching and like trying to find answers to strengthen my religion. Like, it was never like, that's the other thing they say is like, you were looking for the doubt. Like, if you have doubt, then Satan kind of adds it in and then you leave.
Oh yeah.
But they always say that. So, but it's just not the case. Like, I was looking for answers because I wanted the confirmation, like, so badly. Like, I cried my eyes out. Like, I was devastated. I've had family like cut me off. Like, it's been like the most devastating experience in my entire life, like not believing in it. But at the same time, it's eventually, anyway, it became like liberating, obviously. But yeah, it's not a fun thing to go through.
Yeah. So how did you decide that you wanted to kind of share your story on YouTube and kind of talk about this more? Because I think, especially someone in your position, an ex-Muslim woman talking about her experiences, there is some backlash that probably comes with that. I'm sure that you received that a lot in some of your YouTube comments.
100%. I mean, I get, so as I said before, you know, me and my husband are both on YouTube at the moment, and we get completely different reactions, and it's just like, so obviously you can see, like, you know, there is this kind of view of women. I think it's because like there's this idea of like protecting women in Islam, which obviously is like a nice thing in a way, but at the same time it's kind of like they just, I mean, that's how people like to say it, you know, but it's like a woman speaking out is so much more painful for them to see, because it's like you should be kind of having the kids of like the next generation of Muslims, like, you know, it aggravates them so much more. And obviously that there is this kind of perspective of women being just what's the word, just more subservient and kind of, you know, just going with the flow. there is that attitude of you know, that the husband is kind of, I mean, just even the perspective of, for example, Islamically, a man can marry a Christian woman or a Jewish woman because ultimately he's the head of the household and he's in control. But a woman wouldn't be able to do that because she has to follow the husband. So there is very much kind of attitude towards women that we are just supposed to kind of follow suit. So when it's like a woman that suddenly changed her mind or speaks out, it's like, whoa, what's happening?
Yeah.
So there definitely is that. And I mean, I actually get a lot of hate. I get like death threats. Who do
you think gets more hate? Do you think you or Vidu gets more hate?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Me, 100%.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's what I figured. Yeah.
100%. Like, it's not even like close. Like, my hate is extreme hate. Like, I get messages constantly about how like, oh, we hope you get gang raped. Like, we hope
Oh my gosh.
Like, it's extreme. Like, it's really extreme. It's not even like a little bit. It's like crazy. I get death threat emails. Like when I go out, because actually I live in like a Muslim community, and you know, I have to be careful. Like now, if I go out, I actually kind of like try to step away from people if I feel like they come too close. I get really scared. Like I'm genuinely scared because I've got so many death threats. So it's definitely a dangerous situation, like when it comes to women, and it's not quite the same with men. So yeah, it's been difficult, but I think the whole point, and what you originally asked me, the whole reason I do this is to normalize it. You know, it is normal for, well, maybe not normal, but it's more normal maybe for like a Christian to become an atheist. As you said, it's more common, it's more heard of. There are much larger atheist communities. And, you know, it's just not normalized at all. As I said, there's such a huge shock factor. It's starting to become, and I love this kind of new wave of people that are just kind of normalizing that, look, you know, we can be part of this Muslim community, but we just don't necessarily believe, like we're ex-Muslims. But that's the thing as well. And I have a video that I titled What I Love About Muslims, because I wanted to make that clear that like, this isn't about the people, like, because I don't agree with the religion, like, you know, Christians that leave Christianity, it's not like we don't like the people or we're like against the people. It's nothing like that. My family is
absolutely
Muslim. My mom is a devout Muslim, you know, she's a hijabi, everything. And like my entire, and I have a huge family, so like my whole family bar my dad and my husband are Muslims. So for me, it's like, you know, there are so many good things about the culture and the people. It's just, I don't believe in the religion. I don't believe in certain aspects of it. And I think there are things that need to be kind of reevaluated and looked at, you know, things that, you know, that maybe aren't for this day and time, and things that are causing oppression in certain parts of the world. And so issues that Muslims, I mean, the biggest sufferers are actually Muslims, you know. When people say, like, you know, you're speaking on behalf of ex-Muslims, I'm like, yeah, but also Muslims, like, they're the ones suffering too, like in kind of Saudi Arabia or in Iran, you know, they're the ones that are at the hands of kind of oppression and difficulty with stuff like this. So I'm speaking on behalf of like all these people, alongside many others. Obviously, I'm not the only voice. There are so many amazing other ex-Muslims that are kind of speaking out. And as I said, just trying to normalize dissent and not divide us. You know, in that video where I said what I love about Muslims, I was like, I speak about it to unite us in a way, because it's like, we shouldn't have to be shunned by our families, which most of us are. I mean, I've had so many people cut me off. As soon as I kind of said I don't believe, it's like, that's it, like, we're done. And it's devastating. And it's like, sometimes it's worse. Like, for me, at least, it wasn't my actual parents. You know, when it's people's parents and like their entire family, and they literally have no one, or they like live with their family, now they have to kind of go out into the streets. I mean, there's so many crazy stories. But it's just, I feel like if this can be normalized within families, and people can just think, okay, you have a different belief, and we'll just accept that, then it'll just make everyone's life so much easier.
I agree. And, you know, this is something I think I've said before on the show. If not, I'm going to say it now. If I ever became a Christian again, I would hope that I would not only still be friends with the atheist community, but like take joy in that, really. I think there's so many perspectives and knowledge and wisdom we can learn from people of other faiths, and of people who don't believe as well. I think that there's a value in having those relationships with people. Like, if my son, if I ever have one, grows up and says he wants to be a Christian, I say, okay, you know, I might ask him questions, but, you know, I'm going to ask him more questions than the average parent. Like, that's going to happen. But it's like, I agree with you. It's like, well, like, if you really believe in the Christian narrative or the Muslim narrative of this idea of free will, that people do choose or do not choose, then you have to let people make that choice. You know, and it seems like sometimes we don't, often, at least in the Christian or Muslim world, like sometimes that choice doesn't feel as given to people. I think people are scared of dissent. I think it brings about these ideas of debauchery and like you said, like going against the grain and going against kind of established authority. And, you know, we're not going to make any progress unless we kind of have these conversations. And more than anything, I want the ex-Muslim community in particular to be able to have a place at the table with the rest of us, ex-Christians, Christians, Muslims, whatever, and be able to feel safe having those conversations. And I think there's a lot of people, especially today, who always have in the ex-Muslim world, who don't feel safe having these conversations too. And I'm so glad to see that you are providing kind of a voice for people and giving people really strength and hope for a new world, I guess, a better tomorrow, that they don't have to feel like they're in danger anymore talking about this stuff. So it's really great to hear that you're doing this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's going to be a tough battle. I don't think it will be easy, but, you know, I think, you know, people find it difficult to kind of accept, like Muslims find it difficult, because I think the difference as well between like Islam and Christianity is, within Islam, they believe like the word of God is their book. The Quran is the literal word of God. The Bible's not like that, right? It's not the literal word. It's like the disciples, right?
That depends on the specific denomination you're talking about, for sure.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I grew up in kind of two different denominational camps. One of them said that it was the word of God. One of them said it was written by a bunch of people. And so there was that conflict growing up in my own life. And I think people wrestle with that even today within the Christian community, obviously. So yeah, it's hard to make definitive statements about that kind of stuff.
Okay, fine. So that's a whole nother thing. But I mean, Muslims believe that the Bible's not the word of God. And the Torah is not the word of God, but the Quran is the literal word of God. And so what that means is it's sometimes difficult to get around things that was written like 1,400 years ago, you know, and things about, you know, that you are supposed to kill an apostate. It's hard to get around that extreme level of things because it's like, well, God said it. So it's a tough battle because we're kind of like, going between kind of, people that are taking things literally, and then anyway, it's a whole other thing. But yeah, it's
I get you. There's structures that are there's power structures kind of built into these beliefs that are hard to disentangle. I think I see what you're saying there, because I think Islam is not the only religion that kind of does that. And historically, those power structures change, and when those power structures change, the interpretations and the beliefs kind of change, and there's definitely a relationship there for sure.